welcome everyone. Welcome panel. Can I have a quick show of hands, first of all, from anyone who uses ChatGPT or Gemini on a daily basis or a similar chatbot? And has anyone ever encountered regular problems with hallucinations and other gobbledygook? Some people, okay. So I think we've seen in the last few years, even big tech companies struggle harnessing data. It's one of the big problems. But imagine companies a fraction of the size of them with they might have sensitive data spread across multiple locations, and we can start to imagine the problems that can arise with that. So managing data is everything. So Chet, you've been CEO of several companies through the years that have been bought by IBM, Google, and now you've set up Datastax in 2019. So what has been the big step change with the rise of the AI hype train the last sort of few years in terms of managing the big data problem? Does it present any unique challenges or new challenges that wasn't already there?
Yeah, for sure. Let me, I'll do 20 seconds.
Longer if you want.
No, I'll just give you a perspective. How many people here use Netflix? How many people here use Spotify? How many people have an iPhone? You all use technology that Datastax actually builds. It's a project called Apache Cassandra. It's the most scalable NoSQL database in the universe, not just this planet, the universe. It actually scales really well, came out of Facebook. Actually had a chance to meet one of the founders today. It was awesome. So Datastax actually fuels when you go and use something on Spotify, your recommendation is from Netflix, whether you do something with an iPhone, whether you're trying to track your FedEx package. So we have a lot of data in our product, right? A lot of data. There is no AI without data. And there is no AI without unstructured data. And there is no AI without unstructured data at scale. So it actually works really, really well for us. Now, there's been a lot of hype, right? And I think the other panelists would agree. There's a lot of hype, like it's all about OpenAI and about let's go with NVIDIA. And NVIDIA is a great partner of ours with GPUs. And everything goes towards an LLM. And we land up talking to a bunch of investors. We did that with Goldman Sachs and a bunch of investors recently, and we keep telling people that it's a lot more than just an LLM, right? You start with ChatGPT. LLMs are awesome. They are awesome, right? They're phenomenal, but they only give you content. The context has to come from data. And my data at Apple is going to stay within Apple. It's not going to be something that I'm going to go and give to OpenAI or Gemini or whatever else it might be. And so the way you get hallucinations to go away or you reduce them and you increase relevancy is by taking content from LLMs, great, awesome, and context from data that's already stored about me. And you bring them together, and the technique generally that people use is called RAG, and so that works really, really well in making that happen. The importance of context is exponentially increasing in the enterprise, and making that available for AI apps or Gen AI apps is where we sit, and so we think this is, outside of the web where you really needed a lot of NoSQL data, this is the best thing that happened for data in general.
Vanessa, on the investor side, I mean, you started out in product before, and now you've moved into working with startups. And is there a common theme that you're hearing from them in terms of problems or hurdles that they're facing in terms of managing data or harnessing data in any way?
Less so on the startup front. Yeah. A lot of the companies I invest in are trying to solve these problems for big enterprises.
Okay.
The big enterprises, the types of things we're hearing from CIOs, and tell me if you hear differently. One, they have a lot of data, right? Like there was the big data promise 10, 15, 20 years ago that never fully came to fruition, but there was a lot of data generated and a lot of data stored. And so now the question is, well, do we pull this data out of storage to use it for RAG or for training our own LLMs? Or what do we do with the data we already have? How do we know what data we want to use? And then there's all kinds of other challenges when you start figuring out what data do you want to surface or give context to an existing LLM, to your own LLM, to your own hosted LLM. So there's a lot to adoption, I would say, and there's a lot to organizing the data you already have. And we'll probably get through a lot of these topics in the rest of this conversation.
What about real-time data? I mean, that's one of the things that I keep hearing about in terms of that's truly going to unlock the power of generative AI. You know, what's happening on that front? I mean, is there anything major happening at the moment in terms of, you know, enabling that?
Honestly, I think people are really excited by the concept of it, and it could unlock a lot of great consumer use cases. When I think of enterprises and the problems they currently have, like they're trying to solve it for customer success. They want to solve it for HR or IT ticketing or things like that, contextual real-time data may not be as helpful than the historic data that's already out there.
At Fivetran, George, you're all about moving data around. What challenges has the rise of AI brought in terms of moving data, you know, on a global level? So you've got maybe one of your customers is maybe based in Europe, for example, and their customers are in, you know, Asia or somewhere else. You know, there's a lot of conflicting things there in terms of regulation. You know, what sort of things are you seeing on that front in terms of tensions and people, what they're doing to solve that?
In terms of like data locality issues, there's nothing really new that AI is bringing to the table that's been around as a problem forever. And the most common pattern we see is people just localize their data in the most restrictive jurisdiction so that everything flows to Europe, basically. That's a simple solution that we see people do. And then sometimes they do more complicated things where they set up multiple central data stores, or they just mask PII. That's the other thing we see very commonly. They just try to mask out everything that has legal implications so that they can create a copy of all their data minus that in one place. I think mostly these language models are an opportunity from our perspective. We've been around for 10 years. We have 7,000 customers for whom we get all their data in one place. And we've, this whole time, replicated lots of text data. It's kind of been not very useful from an analytics perspective until recently. You couldn't really do anything with it. You know, numbers, you can add them, you can count things. But text was sort of an opaque blob, and now language models are giving us the ability to peer into that. I think RAG is like the most obvious thing you can do. Once you get all your data in one place and you have text data, you can build RAG on top of that. I don't think RAG is the end of history. I don't know what else is coming, but from my perspective, the real fundamental innovation here is the ability to make meaningful use of text. And what that's going to unlock is we shall see.
So, can you give any examples of some of your customers who operate globally? So maybe a company that's maybe based, say, in France and one maybe based in India or China. Like, does that present problems because there's completely different regulatory sort of landscapes going on there?
Yeah. So LVMH is a big customer who operates in a lot of jurisdictions.
Sorry, which one was that?
LVMH.
Okay. Is that Louis Vuitton? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're a conglomerate. They have many different brands. I should ask a question like yours. How many of you have a Louis Vuitton handbag? How many?
Or Tiffany's.
How many of you had a shot of Hennessy before you came here? They, you know, they have many systems in many different jurisdictions. I think the main solution they use is masking. But I am not familiar with that particular detail of how they solve that problem. I know they move a lot of logistics data with us, and I'm not exactly sure to what degree they run into like data locality problems.
But when you think about personalization, like one of the things that is, I think, the holy grail for next generation commerce or retail or whatnot is personalization of experiences on their website or in other places, or when you write into customer support. But what I find interesting, like for the LVMH example, they have a lot of customers in China, but their customers' information from China can't, my understanding is, leave China. And so how do you train that LLM for that personalization in China if you want some of those learnings to then also cross over into the experiences they have in Europe and in the US.
Yeah, I mean, China is its own world.
Yeah.
We operate a lot of data pipelines, and we don't operate in China at
There you
all. There's nothing crosses that boundary as far as I know.
You let your own customers worry about that, basically, yeah.
Yeah, I think they just have completely parallel systems, companies
That's
that
what we
operate in
found
China.
as well.
And
Yeah.
they operate on a totally different stack, because companies like us don't even sell there.
What about OpenAI? I think they're one of your customers as well, aren't they?
Yeah, OpenAI has been a customer since
how
they
do
started.
they use Fivetran? Like what?
They have a very comprehensive use case. They like to break everything every week with scale, and we move a comprehensive set of systems for us. They used to do a lot of product analytics about how people are using their products, how things are working.
Is it used within ChatGPT or is it for other?
We move the underlying databases of pretty much all their systems. Yeah. They're challenging because of their size and because they like to just like set something up and then just scale it to infinity. So they sort of look at one level like a very small company. They don't have that many systems of record. There's just like an obscene amount of data in them. They have like our biggest Stripe account, our biggest lots of things.
Okay.
So, Paul, I want to go back to the real-time part that you
Real-time,
asked
yeah,
for,
real-time
because I
data.
think this is important. For those of you that have been around, predictive AI was what came. AI is, neural nets, been around for a while, all that stuff. Predictive AI came around, and it was marginally successful because the number of people that were working on it, because the pool of people that can work on predictive AI tools is generally people who can do machine learning and a data scientist. The promise of Gen AI is that it's near real time, right? ChatGPT would not have taken off if you asked a question and came back 4 hours later, right? So it's all about whether it is agents as a use case, right? Chatbots, and you can actually have them conversational, or you can make them actionable agents, whether it's relevant search, whether it is synthesis. It doesn't matter what kind of use case you have and the progression you're making, but it's all about making things happening in real time or in near real time. And I think that puts a different level of focus on using real-time systems, because you want the data to be relevant to the search I just did 5 seconds ago, or 10 seconds ago, or 20 seconds ago, right? If I'm going to a travel site and I want to look at something, and I said beach 5 seconds ago and I said mountains 30 seconds ago, I want the most relevant search showing up to what I do. Without real-time relevancy, Gen AI will not take off, right? It is, and you will not get relevancy if you do not have real-time data. And hence the real-time context, and hence this is really important beyond what OpenAI and all the LLMs do.
So what are the big challenges at the moment in terms of bringing proper real-time, processing, real-time data to the mix? What's preventing that from really taking off?
It's by the way, what's
in terms of stock market?
this is a great question. So I think people know how to build apps that run on your mobile device and things like that, right? Now the question is, how do you make sure that the app is at least as good as what the human response would have been if the human was in the loop? At least as good. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate, right? Just think about a call center app. Do you find your call center person that you're talking to is accurate? Probably not. 65 to 70%. Great. All you need is the app to get to about 70% accuracy, and you're ready to go. To do that, you need to use systems like RAG, and I don't disagree. There are many new systems that will come in place, but something that goes back and forth between the LLM and the contextual data you have, and it's using the latest ways of actually decreasing hallucinations and increasing relevancy. So I think that's something that we find that people have to get used to it. People understand scale, right? George has been doing this for a while. We've been doing it for a while. People understand scale. People understand ease of use. Relevancy is a new muscle for developers. They've never had to deal with this before, and this is something they're trying to get to, going back and forth and saying, what is the best, most relevant result I can give to this particular user? Because if you do it right, your sales will go up by 25, 30, 40, 50%.
So how far away do you think we are from getting to that point where it's like, stock market data and everything, you can ask it anything that's happening in the world and it will give you, close to accurate responses?
I think
it's the one thing I keep hearing from people is that at the moment generative AI is just a sort of fancy chatbot, and
so we've got to like just I will answer the question, and I'd love to get their opinion as well. But just to be clear, this is not the first time we've been on this, right? I mean, it's not like the web worked in '94, right? It took a while for the web to get it. It's not like mobile worked. Remember, mobile started with Angry Birds. The Angry Birds era was there for a long time before we actually had real apps on it. The same thing will happen. I call this the Angry Birds session, the era of Gen AI, right? Super interesting. Some chatbots here, some chatbots there. GPT is really good. ChatGPT is really good. Gemini is getting better. All that stuff's awesome, but it's not completely changing my life, right? No one's doing my laundry yet, right? And I think that's what we want to get to at some point. So I think this year, every enterprise that we work with is putting something into production. Small, internal, but putting into production because they're actually working out the kinks on how to form the teams to go and make this happen. I think next year is what I call the year of transformative AI. That's when people will start doing apps that actually start changing the trajectory of the company that they work for.
I have things to say about real time.
Great. Hopefully you
The title of
disagree.
this session is The New Data Pipeline.
Yeah.
Real-time data pipelines are a phantom. They are almost never needed for real use cases. People obsess over them. We see this all the time at Fivetran. People first of all, the term real-time is a misnomer. None of us work on real-time systems. Actual real-time systems, you have to use like ASICs. I used to be a scientist and worked on actual real-time systems. Low latency, that's what we're talking about, like latency of seconds. We see people put this in RFPs all the time, and we can do it, and they almost never use it in production. And the reason is there are virtually no use cases where you actually need up to the last 10 seconds data. And for the very few that do exist, you almost always just want to build that workflow in the system of record. You don't want to move. If you need to hit those kinds of latency targets, you should figure out any way you can to just build that workflow inside the system of record where the data is born. So this is a thing that people obsess over. I hear about it all the time, but true low latency use cases are so rare.
I haven't heard of them. Like I agree, it's a hot topic. I haven't heard any CIO articulate exactly what they're going to use it for. The best I've heard is like weather events for customer support.
And by the way, for all the time, that's why I was very specific. It's near real time, right? As long as there's a near real time use case, and they are, right? You wouldn't want your relevancy information from Netflix to be delayed, right? You're okay with a 5-second delay, but you really want the information, and the same thing for your FedEx tracking system or whatever else it might be, and your agents are going to be built on that data, right, as you go forward. At least
yes, but all those examples, those workflows are built inside the system where the data is generated. Like the FedEx tracking example, you build it all on one database, so you have a single system where it's all internalized. Everyone's working off the same copy of data. In the context of data pipelines, I'm saying real-time use cases are extraordinarily rare. Most of the ones I have seen are due to poor system design, where someone has spread a workflow across two systems of record, and now they attempt to keep it in sync at sub-second latency as a way to mitigate like double spend problems and things like that. Which, listen, messy systems are part of reality, and we help people make them work. But that's not something to aspire to.
Yeah, no, we don't disagree. But there are many use cases we're seeing where it's not real time, it's not stock information, but I think we see a lot of people doing something that they want to get it to near real time, and they want to make the information available.
What about the return on investment at the moment for all these startups and even bigger companies are putting all this money into building data pipelines for their AI applications? And is there actually a real return on investment in that at the moment? Is it something that is there particular sectors or applications where it's a worthwhile investment just now, or is it all just sort of people trying to reading about the hype and thinking they should be getting involved too?
Sorry. New companies investing in new data pipelines. I think that
investing in these data pipelines to harness the power of AI today.
Yeah, I think most companies that are getting founded today want to be on the latest, because even if it's not exactly clear which direction they're going to go in. It was like when microservices came out. It was like, well, we get the benefits of it, and we're going to build it into a little more complicated, and we're not as familiar as we are with a big monolith code base. But I think everyone's adopting these new data pipelines in the hopes that they can be more flexible, because I do think, to your point, we're in the early stages. This is going to look very different. Is it going to be RAG? Is it going to be something else? If it is something else, whenever that comes, companies that are being started today want to be able to adapt to that and move into that direction. And so I do think everyone is trying to get on the latest as they're building companies. And I think that there's a lot of anxiety with founders on, or if we build this all up in this way, are we going to have to scrap it in 5 years? Because that's a very dangerous proposition to be in as a founder.
So what are they doing at the moment to sort of mitigate against that then? Are they, how are they future-proofing themselves?
I think it's very hard to future-proof yourself, especially when the future is moving at this velocity. But as new tools come out, I think I'm seeing a lot of adoption, a lot of testing things out. I'm seeing more technical information being shared on founder WhatsApp channels than ever before. Before it was all like founders complaining about term sheets and whatnot. Now it's a lot of like, well, this just came out, should we use this? Is anyone actually implementing XYZ? Because there is some anxiety about what your infrastructure is going to look like and what that's going to enable you to do as things move faster.
I think what we find, and we'll end up getting a lot of startups actually using our technology, because it's not just the database, it's also the PaaS layer that we have on top with products like Langflow. Two things that we find that the founders are doing right. Number one, they're actually building it on open source technologies, because there is future proofing that comes with it. Because I think that's, like we have a saying inside Datastax that says, if it's not done in open source, it's probably not worth doing. In the Gen AI space, we have a very extreme view of it, right? And so we definitely think that's number one. The second thing is, I think the thing that they need to focus on is not worry about things like scale. And they should use things that get them as quickly as possible to product market fit, because I think they will land up scrapping their product, right? They will land up rebuilding it, right? Every startup does that, but if you have PMF, you have a lot of air cover to actually go and make that happen.
So just a quick thing just now. So I guess one of the main takeaways from this is that there's no shortage of data, plenty of data kicking about. The problem is getting the balance between quantity and quality. So what can companies do at the moment to, strike that balance between, unlock the real value in the data that they have? What are the sort of number one thing they can do at the moment?
I would say work backwards for what you're trying to accomplish. Like, what is the thing you're trying to solve for? Is it solving customer success? And if it's very specifically, solve the FedEx tracking problem. Is it, whatever it is that you're trying to solve for, then work backwards of what is the workflow, and then what is the data that you need to provide that workflow, and then find that data wherever it resides, and then use it for this purpose. But I think trying to make a general purpose, we want to use generative AI across our company, but we don't know how, so let's just throw a bunch of data at this LLM and hope it spits out the right thing for any given person in any given workflow in our company. I think that is a project that sounds like it's going to be very, very big, very inaccurate, very expensive, may not yield the results you want. But I would say, to your point, start small. What we're seeing is companies starting small with internal applications with very specific goals, and then finding the data that matches what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, only solve the problems you have today. That's the mantra. And don't plan ahead, and then once you've built something 10 times, then worry about how to architect it. The costs in innovation are always 99% in things you built that didn't work out, not in things that worked out that you wish you had planned for scale ahead of time. That's even though those are the problems we always think about in retrospect, I really wish I could go back and wire my Salesforce implementation differently. Those are not the 99% of the costs you bear. They're all the things you build that don't work out.
But that's the pain that you have to deal with for a long time.
I know, and so it's very salient in your mind.
I'll go back to, this is not new to the industry. This is my 5th technology wave I'm actually living through. And the framework is the same: technology, people, process. We talked about technology, how you think about open source and think about things like that. I think from a process point of view, this is the wrong time. To George's point, is don't focus on process at all, right? Just go off and actually do a few projects, make them successful, and then when you think you have some success, then you can actually go off and say we have a new way of doing things. The most important thing for Gen AI, and I think the startup folks get it at this conference, and that's why it's really good to see the enterprises. It comes down to the people, the SWAT teams that actually go off and build the first 2, 3, 4 projects. Because I think once you get those, because they are not reading a manual, they are writing the manual for how to do Gen AI apps, right? And so that is something that you absolutely need, and that's what people should focus on. Whether it's an internal app, whether it's an external app, but just go out and get something out in production. Don't worry about actually making it hugely impactful that'll change the world, right? Hero apps that you need to do, that'll come in 2025. Right now, just focus on getting something done.
Okay, just to quickly finish off, just distill that advice into one really short nugget point in terms of what's the one thing that startups should avoid when constructing their data pipelines for building AI applications. What's the or the number one mistake that they could make?
Boiling the ocean.
Boiling the ocean?
Yeah, I think that's the number one mistake that they would do, boiling the ocean. I think start with something really small, and start with somebody who is curious. I'll go back to the people, not the technology as a product guy. Start with somebody who's curious, who has a growth mindset, and has a drive to get it done.
Vanessa?
It's along the same lines as start with the use case. What are you trying to solve for? I think it's hard to tell a founder don't boil the ocean when they're starting a company and they want to tackle this big vision that they have. But I do think starting small and then expanding out, and to your point, just trying to make it successful in the get-go. Because the biggest waste of time is all the things that weren't successful. So just focus on getting the one thing right and then scaling out from there. But it's so tempting with generative AI to go horizontal and want to boil the ocean right off the bat because it's so cool and you can build so many amazing demos.
Yeah, I would say if you're building something that involves working with customer data, don't neglect permissions. A lot of the challenges you're going to actually have are going to have to do with permissions, and give serious consideration to storing even a lot of text data in a relational database, because relational databases are amazing for dealing with complicated permissions problems, users, roles, this, that, the other thing. So the traditional technology stack has a lot of value in the context of AI applications, because AI applications, like all enterprise applications, are all about permissions.
This is true.
Okay, we're out of time. Really appreciate your time. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.